Hello, hello, hello. It is Thursday. It is 5:30 p.m. It is August. And I can't believe it's August, but welcome to another episode, idea, time slot. Just welcome to Let's Talk Power Live. It's Thursday. I'm Dr. Tangi. And I want to ask you a question. What are you thankful for? I'm thankful for the opportunity to spend the day at a school in Stafford, Virginia, supporting their English teachers today. They're getting ready to welcome students to school, and we had a very important conversation about how to read text through two lenses. The first lens was about the idea of representational balance. And the other idea was about 7 forms of bias in educational materials. So I'm thankful for the chance to always spend time with teachers. So what are we doing today? It's August. Kids are beginning to go to school. And I am not saying going back to school, because when we say we're going back to something, it gives us the idea that where we're headed is somehow to a place of familiarity. And kids are going to school different than they were last year. Unfortunately, their schooling has not changed. So in a lot of ways, they're going back to school, but I don't want us to have that conversation. I want us to have a different conversation. Last week, we talked about what students were going to go to and that idea of back versus going to. This week, we're going to have another conversation that's related to that. This week's conversation is who gets to shape what students really go back to. We have a conversation about the district leaders. We have a conversation about building leaders. We have a conversation about educators. One group who holds more power than probably all of those others rarely gets talked about. They're almost like the third rail of a conversation. We're going to talk tonight and over the next few weeks about school boards, because school boards really hold a tremendous amount of power. And I'm going to share some data with you that's going to be very fascinating, because when I learned about it from my colleague and friend who's going to join us tonight, I was fascinated to hear about it. So as we start every week, a couple of things. Number one, have you hit the subscribe button? We know that 80% of you who watch us, who hang out with us, are still dating. I love a good date, but I would love for you to commit and become one of our subscribers. And also want to ask you to be sure that you like. And if what we're talking about tonight resonates with you, I'm going to invite you to share it with someone else. But here's another thing that we do every week. I want to share with you what power in education is about. So it is the instrument of democratic designs, and it is no less the instrument of power. The control of information, the shaping of understanding, and the influence of judgment are critical elements common to democratic design, power theory, and educational philosophy. That is the capital P power in education. And all of that work, those ideas, those concepts come from my book, Understanding Your Instructional Power. And again, always invite you to have a copy and get a copy of that. But when we talk about power in education as an umbrella idea, I want to go that step further and really share with you what instructional power is all about. And here it is. It can be understood as an educator's use of their state, district, and building ascribed job-related authority to afford or constrain a student's access to learning. What does that even mean? It means if the decisions you make impact what a child has access to in a positive way or impacts what they have in an adverse way, you are exercising your power. And David Nyberg says, it is not whether or not we have it, it is how we use it. And that brings me to another conversation tonight. Want to remind you, please make sure you have accessed our Becoming Agency Savvy article. We've been doing a lot of fun articles this year over the summer. And this article is all about looking at whether or not your systems all are aligned around what agency is all about in your building. What it looks like, sounds like, and feels like. Next up, Our summer power chats are still going strong. I'm excited that this week we dropped our powers chat with Ashley Cuthbertson, who has music as a vehicle. Please make sure you access those. Well, tonight, I'm excited to bring to the stage a dear, dear friend of mine, Karin Chenoweth. She is a leader in education. She and I worked at the Education Trust. She is an author, and she's doing something fascinating. She has started an organization called Democracy in Education. And in her role as the founder of that organization, she is really bringing to the fore this idea of the power behind our school boards. So let's welcome Karin Chenoweth. Karin, thank you for being here on Let's Talk Power Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
So as we get started, and before we do, Karin and I have talked about lots of great things, and we call them rants. We had Ed rants, and tonight we're going to have an Ed rant. But before we get started on the Ed rant about school boards, help us understand what democracy in education is all about.
You mean my organization?
Your organization, yes.
Yes. I'd love to. So right before I left Ed Trust in 2022, they had a conference that you and I were both at, and there was a great guy, just a wonderful guy, Michael Cook, and he had a rather ugly incident happen to him in his school district, and he and his wife decided they had to do something about that. And his wife began volunteering in the PTA, and he said, "I will run for school board." And I said, "This is great. You seem great." He did seem great. He is great. And I said, "How are you learning about education, and how are you learning about how to campaign?" Because he was a business guy, actually,
right. Mm-hmm.
Which is, kind of a classic for a school board member. And he said, and this proved how great he was. He said, "It's really hard. I'm trying to find information, and it's really hard." He didn't say, "Oh, I know everything I need to know."
Right.
And he said, "No, it's really difficult. I'm working with my local, some local civic organizations, the local NAACP, and, some other things, but, it's really hard." So I said, "I've been working at a national level for 2 decades. I will find you resources. I know I can find them." And then I spent about 2.5 months looking for something that would help him. And I couldn't find anything.
Wow.
That was actually helpful. And, nobody provided campaign training for school board members, that was just not thought about. And, if you think about what do school board members and candidates need to know something about, right? Like, for example, one of our many rants has been about reading instruction. They need to know a little bit something about reading instruction, but they don't need to know all about
all of it, right? The nitty gritty of it, right?
They need to know enough to ask really good questions of superintendents. That's their job as board members, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you find out a little bit of information about school, about reading instruction? It's very difficult. So you start with the, Preventing Reading Difficulties in Young Children report from 1998. Then you move on to the National Reading Panel report. Then you listen to Emily Hanford's podcast, and then you read the subsequent, 25 years of research. You've got a PhD in reading instruction, and you still don't know anything about school budgets or how you operate as a school board, right?
Exactly. And then on top of all of the reading stuff, then you got to figure out, well, how do your kids get ready for college? Are you going to have this kind of, it's almost like, how do you help a person begin to get a scope of knowledge about the vastness of
the field of education?
Of the field of education. Because you have to be able to run on a quote unquote platform, right? You got to run on something, right? And here's some things I am convinced that people don't know about school boards. 90,000 people serve on local school boards. They govern more than 13,000 public school districts. Public schools serve about 49.4 million students. That's astounding. That's
Right.
when you
Right.
told me that years ago, I was like, Karen, what are we really?
What are we talking about?
What are you talking about? How is it that for something so important,
Mhm.
there's so little information out there to support people to do it well?
No, that's exactly right. Now, I mean, there are state school board associations. There is a national school board association that is, mm, well, we can talk about that. But um,
Offline.
no, I mean, it has been weakened by political division.
Right.
So many of the red states have pulled out of the National School Board Association. So it's weakened. But none of them really provide a lot of information to school board candidates.
Candidates. Right. So
Right?
once you get there, then
Then
you have
there's some
access,
information,
something to
right?
do.
I mean, we
Right.
can argue
Yeah.
about whether it's good enough or not,
Mhm.
but there is some information. Whereas for candidates, there was really nothing. So I decided, well, uh, several people, including someone who used to run the National Association of State Boards of Education, told me there is nothing, you're going to have to do it. So I whined for a little while and didn't want to do it, but I
And in true
eventually
Karen
thought,
fashion, you did it. In
I
true
eventually
Karen
just,
fashion, you said, "All right, let me run in here and do this." Right.
right. And so what I did was I built a website with a lot of information, and I built it around Michael. And I thought, what does Michael need? If Michael needs something, then other people will need it as well.
That's right. That's right.
So we now have a considerable library of materials for school board candidates. Much of it is public. We have briefs on reading instruction, on the role of school board, on school financing, culturally relevant pedagogy, critical race theory. And I
Which is
started
not
this
a
back
thing
in the
in
day,
K-12.
right?
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Are we allowed to say critical race theory even in this landscape, which we both know is not a thing in the K-12
Right.
arena?
I mean, but
Right.
if they're faced with a question about critical race theory,
Here's
like
what you
I
do.
don't know anything about it, right? Oh,
That's
I
right.
can read one page. Now I know a little bit something, and I can, answer these questions. I can ask questions.
Right.
So that's what I've done, and we now have a community of hundreds and hundreds of folks around the country, school board members, former members, candidates, people who work
Wow.
on school board campaigns, and we are able to share, bring together the collective wisdom of this group,
Right.
particularly around campaign issues. So we have a private members only forum with a lot of information about how you campaign specifically for school board.
Right.
There's now a lot of training, actually.
But as there should be, because years ago, and you and I were talking about this, nobody was checking for the school board.
No,
It was not a big thing. School boards being a big thing, all the money being spent in school boards, that's a relatively new, last, not even full 10 years, maybe the last 5 to 7 years, I would say, that all this money, that school board membership, running for school boards is now becoming almost as important as the mayor and other kinds of city official.
I would like to think that people now understand the importance of school boards, because what we had was kind of a real studied, deliberate ignorance about school boards for many, many years. They existed, they're good, they're do-gooders, they're, whoever, right? They're not going to screw things up too much. I don't have to pay too much attention, right?
Right.
Well, we see what happens when you don't pay much attention. There's a whole movement of people who want to take over school boards in order to undermine public education, in order to strip schools for the parts. I mean,
exactly. For their parts, it's like a car.
Like
right?
a car,
put them on
here's
an
underused building. Let's sell it to a religious private school for $1, and
that's right.
Be done with it. And once that happens, when there's an extremist majority on a school board, the community is horrified. And when we're lucky, when we're good, when they come together and they elect pro-public education folks to be back on the school board. And that has happened around the country. I'm happy to say that we've played a small part in some of those races in Missouri, in Colorado, in Virginia. And anything we can do to help, we want to help, because right now public schools are under a real threat.
A real threat.
And if we aren't careful, if we just sort of think they're always going to survive no matter what happens, we could lose them. And I'm terrified of that, actually.
I want to share some more data with you, and I want you to look at these numbers through the lens of the idea of representation and why representation on a school board matters. So about 44% of public school students are white. 77% of school principals are also white. 87% of the superintendents were also white. What does that do also when a majority of school board members are not racially or ethnically representative of their student population?
Well, so it's not great. I mean, we can just stipulate it's not great, but there are some real structural problems.
Right.
Structural problem number one: school board members in general are not paid anything, or they're paid a very small stipend that used to be good enough for babysitting. Now it might be good enough for parking. I mean, it's like it's unbelievable. Like maybe $25 a meeting or something.
Right.
It's just, so the model is you're a volunteer, and you're a selfless volunteer. So what you end up with, I mean, I'm going to make some broad generalizations, but I think I'm right. You've got, local business people who see being on a school board as good for their business, which it is. They get to be well known.
That's
and
true.
they're public. I don't mean to say they're not public spirited, but if you're an insurance agent, you need to get your name out there,
right?
Or a car dealer or whatever. So you have local business folks. Sometimes you'll have retired educators. Those are kind of your, but they only know education from afar,
right? From their time period. That's right.
From their vantage point. Or stay-at-home parents, usually mothers. And who is able to do this without any kind of pay? Well, they tend to be white.
Right.
If you're young and building a family and building your career, it's really hard to take on it's a volunteer job, but it's a really demanding volunteer job.
It is.
Right.
And the decision-making tree, right? The decision-making power that they have, they approve spending. They approve.
They're in charge of half of local budgets.
Half of local budgets.
Roughly, depending on the area, a little bit less, a little bit more. Billions of dollars. My school district, your school district too, I presume. It's like billions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a volunteer board.
Absolutely.
It's a volunteer
work. That's right. If we think about Loudoun County School Board, I mean, Loudoun County is one of the wealthiest counties in the country. So we know that just by that sort of general idea on its face means that the school board is in charge of a lot of money, right? Yes, and what does that look like? And then here's what's interesting to me. The local school board elections, and this goes to your point, often draw fewer voters than national elections, right? We know that. Yes. But look at this number, 5 to 10% turnout.
Yeah.
And then your last point right here, the low turnout can give organized groups outsized influence. So what does that mean for representation and this idea of power in education through a school board when there's so few people it's like they don't feel, they know the wind is there, right? They can't see the wind, but boy, let it be windy out. You know it's there, right? So your school board is like the wind. You know they're there. If your funding isn't there, I know there's a school district in New Jersey right now, my home school district, where I first got my first job in teaching, they had some leadership challenges. They are now having to cut custodians. They are now having to determine whether assistant principals are going to be shared. That's a school board decision because they're dealing with, like you said, the finances. So what does that mean for representation?
Well, it makes it, well, what it means is that if people get organized, they can demand representation. They can get representation. They, run, elect, run, organize, elect, right? But we have to be clear that it's, in terms of most people, it's going to be somebody who is established in their job. Their kids are a little older, like it's just really difficult to ask someone to do this job for no or very little pay, and without a lot of community support.
Mm-hmm.
They really need the community support behind them, and they need to understand this is a major commitment, and the community needs to understand that it's a major commitment that they need to really appreciate. Not like give them money, except
Right.
the money they need for their campaigns, but to honor that commitment.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that is a very valuable, within a lot of communities. I think in the Black community, it's a valuable commodity, right?
It is. So where has in what you're seeing with the group that you've been supporting and pulled together and the resources you're making, where are these influxes of dollars coming from?
So I would here, there's a lot of dark money now in school boards.
Wow, in school boards.
In school board races. Not in school boards, but in school board
No, but
races.
in the races themselves, dark money has found its way into school board races.
Yeah. For example, there's a PAC called 1776, which is, Donald Trump Jr. has raised money for and so forth. You go find out who's giving money to them.
Mm-hmm.
There are organizations that train and support school board candidates really well. I mean, they get good training. There's the Leadership Institute, which actually is funded by a billionaire we can name. I'll remember his name in a minute. But other organizations where, you look up their 990s, their tax forms, and you go, well, you're supposed to list your contributors, but you don't.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of money. And like there was a race here in Maryland and another one in Delaware where and really all over the country, where mailers just show up and they have either no, paid for little line on them,
Mm-hmm.
or what it says makes no sense. You look up that organization and there is no organization. And it's a work site.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so but they are often tendentious. I would,
Mm-hmm.
if you wanted to be kind, you'd call them tendentious. They lie about the people they're opposing. And so that's what we're dealing with on the anti-public education front, right?
Right.
On the
Right.
pro-public education front, It's really hard. They have a hard time raising money. They, they the people who are giving money to politics don't necessarily understand that school boards are an important place to put their money.
That was my next question to you. What is a misconception that people who think they want to run for a school board seat, what do they walk into that idea from a misconception perspective? What do they walk in misconceiving or misunderstanding?
Yeah, well, so sometimes they have in their head what a school board campaign used to look like. You put up some signs, you get some endorsements, and you're done, pretty much.
Right.
You talk to the local mayor or the town, the city council, and you get their okay, and they'll think that's okay. They'll think they're done, or because there's been so little interest in school board campaigns, many seats have nobody running for them.
Okay.
Like 40% of school board seats have no one running.
Wow.
And then another percentage have only one person running.
Got it.
So what happens then? The school board will appoint you. So you apply to get appointed to the school board by the school board. Well, now your electorate is, 5 people or 7 people, whatever, you just have to convince those people that you should be a school board member. And then you're an incumbent the next time you run. And you think, okay, I'm in.
I'm here. Right. I'm in.
And sometimes that works. I'm not saying it never works. But if there is a candidate who is what I call anti-public education, but or an extremist, they're going to have money behind them. They're going to have good training behind them, and you better actually make a campaign. Plus, it helps you be a better school board member if you actually campaign.
If you campaign, because I would suspect if you take the idea of campaigning into modern times, then you're going to spend some time listening to your constituency.
You're going to spend some time listening. We advise, if at all possible, you do a lot of door knocking. We have one member who she started a year early, 2 or 3 doors every single day.
Wow.
And she won. Now she was an incumbent.
But she still took that idea, but let me get out here. Yeah, right.
And one of the reasons you do that is because you hear what people are saying, right? And issues emerge that you didn't know. Well, I didn't know there was mold in that elementary school. Oh, I'm glad I'm glad you told me your kid has asthma. Now I can
do something about it. Right.
Or, what do you mean your kid doesn't have gym? Your kid's supposed to have gym. What do you mean? That's a question I need to be asking.
The idea of learning, that is really insightful to understand that, approach it the way you would approach any kind of campaign.
Yes.
And how do you get smarter about the role before you try and seek the idea of becoming this thing, before you get pushed out there. One of the things we do here on Let's Talk Power Live is we always give power moves so that people can walk away with some ideas on what they should do. So let's talk through our 3 power moves and see what you think. The first one is, and I bring this one up first because, again, you just talked about that, like learning and door knocking, but really learn the role before you seek the seat, right? Yeah. Understand what school boards actually do. Learn the difference between governance and management. Study how board decisions shape student and educator experience. What is the difference between the governance and the management?
So this is such an important question because many school board candidates don't even understand this. Even school board members don't always understand this. And it causes a lot of problems, right? How to put the okay? So I walked into a school. This is years ago. I walked into a school, and the principal. This was a school that I just a little background for folks who don't know. My job at Ed Trust was to lead the work finding and learning from high performing and improving schools and districts that serve children of color and children from low income backgrounds. So this was a school outside of San Antonio, and it was, scoring off the chart, very impoverished neighborhood. Most of the kids lived in trailer homes, and so there was nothing there. Like, there was no town really, but there was the school. I walk in, the principal's showing me back. We walked through the school to a school board, to a conference room where the school board for that district actually met. And along the way, I saw this little sign on a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, and it said, "Please, I can't even remember his name, Mr. Smith, please don't leave." And I said to the principal, I said, "So what's going on with that, Mr. Smith?" And he said, "Oh, well, I just quit." And I said, well, "Why?" Because you and I know that means the death of that, not the death, but
it is impactful.
The deterioration of that.
Absolutely.
School. And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, the school board wanted me to hire somebody as my assistant principal, and I wouldn't do it." That is a school board that does not understand its role between management and
governance. That's right. Right. You're in the gray area. Exactly right.
It's
right.
Not gray. That is,
true. That's right. You overstepped your boundary.
That's right. Overstepped your bounds. But there are a lot of school boards in Texas and elsewhere that think school board members think their job is to get more playing time for, the quarterback on the football team, or, to hire a particular person as a principal or whatever, or teacher. That's not their job.
It's not their job.
Is as a board, think of it almost like a board of directors.
Right.
I mean, I don't like using business analogies because it's really quite different, but boards of directors of companies do not hire the secretary.
Right. Exactly right. They do not hire the secretary. Right. They help.
Right. They hire the CEO.
Right. They help set the policy.
Right. They help
set
the
policy. Manage structures.
Right. Yeah. So, the school board's job is to hold the hopes and dreams of their community, really. It is to ensure that all the students in their district get all the opportunities possible, right? That's their job. Whether they do it or not is a different question. And unfortunately, too many do not do that. But the way they, that sounds kind of highfalutin, but the way they do that is very concrete. It is, they hire and supervise the superintendent, and by supervise, they question.
Right. They check. Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly.
And they set goals for the superintendent and for themselves. They should be setting goals for themselves as well. Yeah. They approve a budget, which should be tied to their goals.
Right.
Too often, it does not.
Exactly. Yeah.
They set policies, certain kinds of policies that shape the ability of the educators to operate. Right? It's the job of educators to figure out what teaching methods, what like the schedules, all the
nuts and bolts
of education that you and I continually talk about in our rants. But it's the school boards that set sort of the overall vision. So, for example, in Steubenville, Ohio, which is almost all the students come from impoverished families, and it is one of the highest performing districts in the country, right? Particularly at some of the grade levels. it had a pre-K program for 3 and 4-year-olds that was specifically for kids with disabilities, and then kids from, intense poverty, right? So it was it was for the neediest kids in the district. Well, there was a great demand for it, and the school board said, we really should expand it. We should make it bigger. So they expand. I don't remember all the details, but they expanded the number of seats that the program could. And this is expensive, right? This is not a wealthy school district.
No, exactly.
And they expanded the number of seats. There's still a high demand. And what happened was the educators tracked the data. And what they saw was that the kids who went through that pre-K program, they were ready. They were hitting the ground running in kindergarten and throughout elementary school. Nobody had to worry about, I shouldn't overstate it, but they were hitting the ground running.
There's a baseline of success that came out of success, meaning readiness to go to the next place.
Exactly. And kindergarten teachers could tell the difference between who had been to the preschool and who hadn't gone to the preschool. It was very clear that the kids who had, on average, did much better than the kids who hadn't. So the school board, they look at the data brought to them by the educators. They said, well, it's clear we must offer the pre-K, the 3 and 4-year-old program to all the kids in our district. Now, was that an easy thing to do? Was that a cheap thing to do? No, it was not. But they set the vision. They said, well, no, this is what we must do in order to provide the opportunities we should be providing to our students, right? So they did. That was a school board decision. That was the governance.
Now, the management of that is the next piece of that.
Work of the educators.
Right.
So it's the job of the school board to say, we put money into this pre-K program. Like, is it doing any good?
Right. Exactly.
Well, let's look at the data.
Let's look at the data and find out.
Exactly. Well, so if it's doing that much good, we need to expand.
To do more. So here's power move number 2. Connect, and here's your perfect lead in. Connect every decision to student experience. Choose one board responsibility: budget, policy, superintendent evaluation, curriculum, facilities, or discipline. Ask how the responsibility affects students, families, educators, and school leaders. And then name whose experiences must be heard before you actually make the decision. That idea of hearing, that idea of listening, that idea of we hear this a lot. Put the empty chair in the room and ask whose voice that is. Is that part of the idea of the kinds of work school board members actually do and must understand that they have to do before they get there?
It's what they should be doing. So here's what happens typically on a school board is that they have public comment period every board, right? So and they do vary in how this works, right? Some boards, anybody who shows up gets 3 minutes. Some boards you have to sign up a week ahead of time, and there's a certain number of slots. But that's kind of the public opportunity to speak. Now, who comes to a school board meeting at 7:00 on a school night? Who can go to a school board?
Because the ones here, again, in Loudoun County, they have them from 4:00 until whatever time.
Right. Sometimes the school board meetings are during the school day, right?
That's right.
They're at 2:00. They're at 1:00. Whatever time they are, it's going to be inconvenient for somebody.
Right.
Guaranteed, right?
That's right. It's going to be inconvenient, 100%.
It's going to be inconvenient for somebody.
Right.
It's not going to be, so right there is a structural problem. If that's the only way you're actually getting public comment on a proposed policy or whatever, that's a real issue.
It is.
So school boards really need to, and there are efforts. I would say that people who take school boards seriously are thinking a lot about this. Like,
right. Yeah. Of course.
Like, maybe we should go meet, in
coffee shops or
centers
in the
coffee shops
mornings or whatever.
whatever.
Yeah.
And make sure that we're not losing touch with what people actually, care about and want to see and what they're upset about and so forth. Similarly, some districts have rules about school board members attending schools.
Yeah, you can't just walk up in a school.
Yeah. That can be very disruptive to a school, right? On the other hand,
it is disruptive. Believe me, it is disruptive.
I understand.
It is worse than having the superintendent show up.
Is it? Oh, that's
because I've had experiences with both.
Right.
And because of the positionality of the school board relative to the superintendent, relative to the principal, it has this air of, I'm at the principal's office, but it's somehow bigger than that. And it is quite stressful. It is quite disarming. I mean, not disarming, but it is quite alarming and jarring, actually. It creates a high level of anxiety. Because
my question about that,
you know what I mean?
Is if it were normalized, in other words, if school board members were showing up all the time, would it still be alarming, or would it be like,
probably not. That's so and so.
Which was like, okay, but whatever. I don't know. Like, I think
it would still feel that way because of, again, we talked a lot about position, right? This idea of hierarchy. We want to pretend that schools don't have it, but they have it. Given how school boards are running in modern times, having that just walk up in your school, it is, it creates that tension. It really does.
And of course, like little districts, probably, everybody knows everybody else, and maybe
that's different. Right.
I don't know. Big districts, you and I are both in big districts. You've got a couple hundred schools and 7 school board members or something. It's a big deal when a school board.
It's a big deal when they show up. Yeah, it really is. It's a
very big. On the other hand, you want them to know what schools are like on a normal day when people aren't putting on a show for them, right? So there's a tension there, and I don't know how to resolve it. I don't pretend to know how to resolve it, but school board members need to be thinking about, how to gather information, not from the same people all the time.
Right.
Because
those voices matter. Absolutely.
Which voices matter. Exactly. I mean, I was a PTA mom. It was participating as a PTA mom was so clearly an ability of privilege. It really was.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. To be that, and I would tell people all the time, and I'd hear people say, "Oh, parents don't care, parents aren't involved." I would say,
they care a lot.
They care a lot. And I said, what? If you looked at me, I would have been considered an uninvolved parent because I couldn't go to things in the middle of the day. Why? Because I was doing that thing called working. I was doing that thing called working, and I couldn't be there every day. But you're right. We have to decide who we want involved and how we're going to get them all involved, particularly if the value statement and the mission statement and all the other statements that we have out there speak to this notion of community, speak to this notion of belonging, speak to the notion of value, right? You have to then create the structures in order to make that happen. Here's our last power move. Practice before you run, participate before you run and before there's a crisis. Attend or watch board meetings before election season. Ideally, right? Hopefully, right? Read agendas, minutes, budgets, and candidate materials. Listen to students, families, educators, and community members before forming conclusions.
Yes.
Yay or nay? Yes.
No, absolutely. I mean, I love this at the end. I'm just reading it. Local democracy strengthens when people engage consistently, not only when they're angry, alarmed, or already campaigning. Absolutely. I mean, here's the thing, though. Sometimes you have to get involved in a crisis. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, there has to be. Sometimes it is the catalyzing event
Right.
that
Sometimes
really
yes,
does do
exactly.
it. Right. Yes.
But
Yeah.
you're absolutely right that's the, if we want democracy to work, there are all kinds of things to think about at a national and state level, but it has to work at a local level. People have to be able to see a tangible difference. They have to be able to see that they have a voice in the conditions of their lives. So, like if they say there's black mold in the elementary school,
right,
and they report that, they need to be able to see a result
of that reporting.
Address it, right?
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if nobody addresses it, they have to be able to go to their local representatives, their school board members, their county council member, whoever, and then see a result. And if it's the fact that they're not seeing those results that has, I think, caused people to sort of go, I don't know, what's democracy ever done for me?
Exactly. It doesn't work for me.
It doesn't work for me. What are you talking about? There's, I can't, it doesn't make a difference what I say or do.
Yeah.
When people think that, and when it's not just their thoughts, but those thoughts are true.
Right. Then you have, right.
Then
because
you have a real problem.
Then we have a problem because then they are locked out. Yeah, they absolutely are locked out. Yes.
Absolutely. And so what we need are people who understand that. And it's not that a school board member can solve every problem. That's not right. So for example, one of the, I just was talking with a former school board member in Portland, Oregon, and she said, people were always asking me to get a principal fired or get a principal fired or whatever. And I would have to say, that's part of the education back, right? Like, so
yes.
You have to learn what a school board does. And when you hear people say, well, this principal, and that person might have a perfectly good reason to want that principal fired, that's right. But it's an education back to say, that's not the role of the school board. The school board doesn't do that. But what I can do is ensure that there is a serious system of hiring good principals, supporting good principals,
right,
evaluating principals, and making sure that principals are hewing to high standards.
That's
and if they're not, that there's a process for getting them out of that job.
That's right.
That's the job of the school board, not hiring and firing, but ensuring that the superintendent has a system of leadership development and leadership selection and support and evaluation. That's what I can do as a school board member. I can't hire and fire. So it's both hearing that there's a really bad principal, or
somebody
thinks that there's a bad principal. There might be perfectly good, but somebody thinks there's a bad principal there. But also helping that person understand what the role of the school board is.
Right.
So I mean, there's an educative role both ways, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why you have to be knowledgeable about the role of the school board before you start campaigning, so that you're not like, I'll get right on that.
Right, exactly.
Because then you're promising things you can't deliver, and that just leads to more cynicism, more discouragement, right? Like, help people understand what this system is. It's a complicated system.
It's school is complicated. People don't. I think that's the rub, that people don't understand the dynamism of a school system. Right. They really don't understand that. And with that, you cannot believe we have actually come to the end of our conversation.
God. Well, that's like our rants.
It's like our rants. They can go on forever. Right. But last words, and before we let you go, I want to let you know who's coming up next week. We got Dr. Dia Bryant coming up
Great.
next week to really talk about, to extend this conversation, this national conversation around school boards. And I thought it was important to have the conversation around school boards now because schools are opening. And this is a perfect time to really discuss it. And as we bring our time to a close, one, remember to subscribe, like the channel. But I want to say this as we end, Karin, you let me know, school boards are not distant from students. You know what I mean? They sit distant, but they're not, because their decisions have direct impact on them. And Absolutely. If you are that person who is considering a run for a school board, do your due diligence. Learn some things, as Karin has shared with us. Democracy needs to stay close to home, and it starts in our local spaces. So, Karin, thank you so much for joining us.
Join Democracy in Education.
And join Democracy in Education. Where can they do that?
Yeah, democracy-education.org.
Love it.
To remember. Democracy-education.org.
And get the information, get her tools, do your own learning, and let's keep public school public. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you. Have a good night, and we'll see you next week.